Okay, let's go ahead and take a look at how to start a grid layout. And remember, I spoke about it. Grid layout is sort of the backbone of your website. So if you want to start a game or create something like YouTube or something like that, grid is sort of the skeletal system of how things will be displayed on your web page. So first, let's go to our Code.hs sandbox. And you want to create a new file, call it index.grid.html. Going to create program, web dev, and create program. Now you have a blank canvas to start from. Okay. Now what we're going to do is, since we already know how to set up a style sheet and stuff, we're not going to grind out all this stuff manually. So let's just go over to W3 Schools, click on Tutorials, click on Learn CSS, click on CSS How To, and here's the code to jumpstart your web page. And we're going to go back. Let's go back. And this is your HTML. Now, I've taught in class, I kind of like to just call it style. This has my style, but shorten it down to style. And you got to also create the style sheet. So you click New, File, and you call it Style to match the name, .css. And you add File. Now we need to make sure that everything is hooked up correctly. So you can see that there is no style, it's just displaying the HTML. So we're going to go into the style sheet and let's just change the background color. So I'm going to style against the body. So you do body and then your squiggly brackets, and we're going to do background color, and let's change it to yellow and reload. And now we know that everything is hooked up correctly. So next, let's go over to the assignment in Google Classroom, and you'll see where it says grid layout. My display is a little different, but it should work all the same. And where it says grid right here in Google Docs, you want to open up that code. And this is a copy-paste job, but we are going to copy and paste over the code and also talk about it. So this is your CSS. See where it says stop, copy, paste here, begin. So just pay attention to what you're copying and pasting, otherwise it won't work. Control C. And since we just styled against the body right here, let's hit enter a couple of times, Control V, and now you have this code in here. Make sure that you have your brackets all lined up and you're not inside here or anything like that. Just make sure it's all lined up. And you'll see that with the period in front, this is a class. So even though it is grid, I just called the class grid. Okay, so let's go ahead and go back here. And I've already set up this whole thing. If you want to copy and paste over, you don't necessarily have to go to W3 Schools. But if you want to copy and paste over everything over here, you can go ahead and do that. So you want to select the highlighted part. Make sure you select all of the highlighted part. Control C. And go back over. And this is your CSS. We just copied over HTML code. So we're going to hit Control V. So this is your HTML code. HTML code goes in the HTML file. CSS code goes into the CSS file. So make sure that you paste into the correct files. So it should look like this, and this should look like this. Okay, having a look. Now, if you remember div is a block element, and you can recycle divs as many times as you want. And by using classes, you can make the div, just do whatever you want. Div is just a generic tag. And if you take a look, we have two different classes going on. We have grid, and then we have a class that says section 1, and you'll see that they're all sort of copies of each other. Section 1, section 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way up to 9. And I had you copy and paste over this right here. This is how, just as a reminder, how you comment out HTML code. Also make sure that you have two divs here. So if you click here, this div gives you a little square right here. And you're going to want to use this because these divs right here, they're going to fill up with content. And you want to make sure that they match, that they have a partner. Okay, going back to your style sheet. So let's take a look at the grid code itself. So I just called this grid. I can call it whatever I want. So I'm going to call it A, B, C, D. Now, if I call it A, B, C, D, I have to make sure it matches the class over here because I changed it. So A, B, C, D. So it doesn't matter what you call it, just as long as it's consistent. Now, the display is grid. So you're telling the website that you are going to display a grid. This says grid template columns. Okay. So a grid looks like, well, let's take a look at what a grid will look like or could look like. So a grid could look something like this. Could also look like something like this. Or something, if you think about YouTube, you have a strip on the side right here with like toolbar stuff. This is like a solid box where you can put comments and people can add comments. And then the videos that are upcoming, whatever the case, and then you have your main square where the video sits. And this is basically the backbone of the display for YouTube videos or something similar. So this is grid itself. And you can see it's broken into columns. So columns are up and down and rows are straight across left to right. Now the first column is 1 right here. Okay, so we're not necessarily counting the boxes themselves. We're counting sort of the gaps in between. So this would be column 1, column 2, 3, 4, 5. Row 1 would start right here. Row 2, 3, 4, and 5. And you can add as many as you want. So if we take a look at this right here, okay, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So they have 6 columns going up and down. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They have 5 columns going across. Actually, it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Remember, it's the strips. 1, 2, let's count these. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Now it's a little confusing, but we'll get clear on how they make this giant blank space right here. So let's just kind of like hold on that for a second. So you're telling the website to display a grid. Oops. So right here, so display grid, and it's going to be broken into columns and rows. Let's pause on grid gap real quick. Now, template columns auto. What this means is when it creates the boxes, it doesn't matter how you resize your browser window, the boxes are going to move across with it. Rows, on the other hand, you can fix the width. So no matter what, the boxes are going to be from top to bottom 100 pixels. You could do 200 pixels, 300 pixels, doesn't matter. And we'll play with this later. So we have our grid, and if you take a look, here's your grid, and encased within these this ABCD class, this grid class, are these sections, and you want to make sure that you have it wrapped in a div. So let's go back to the CSS. Okay, you have section 1, you have grid column, grid row, and it's set at 1, 1. You have background color blue, and then I have just some other things in here that just manage the text. So since in the HTML I have 1, 2, 3, 4 all the way to 9, I'm going to have to copy this 8 more times. So I have blue, so I'm going to go Control C. Well, let's take a look at it. Let's see what it looks like right now. So here's what it looks like right now. So it's in column 1, row 1. And you can see that everything else is pretty much gridded out, kind of like this, but it really isn't. It's just following the rules of, the left to right, top to bottom. And we haven't really given it any instructions yet. So what we're going to do is we are going to just recycle our code. And we're going to call this section 2 for section 2. Let's leave this column and row alone for right now. But I want to use different colors. That way I can tell each box from each other. Okay, so what I've done is I've created section 1, section 2, and I've given them all a unique colors. So blue, pink, brown, green, light blue, black, orange, red, and white. And you see I've changed the section numbers and all of that. So let's take a look at what that does. Uh-oh, everything is gone. The reason why everything is gone is if you think of the grid layout like this, so let's go back here. I basically gave it all the same instruction. I told it to take all of these boxes within my grid and stack them in one spot. So I need to change the grid column 1 and the grid column row for each one. So section 1 goes grid row 1, 1. Now I want section 2 to be next to, on the right, to section 1. So I changed section 2 to grid column 2, row 1. It's in the first row. So let's take a look. There's section 2. And section 3 is going to be at 3, 1. Now section 4, I want to appear right here. So that's still in the first column right here, but we're going to change the row. Grid row 2. There's your section 4. And you sort of go like this all the way through until you have all 9. So this would be grid column 2, row 2. This would be grid column 3, row 2. This is grid column 1 again, but now we go down to row 3. And let's say I mess up. Well, it becomes pretty obvious I messed up because I haven't, let's say I give it the same instruction. Let's say I screw up. And so there's section 7 and it's orange, but I don't change the row. It should be where section 4 is. See? So you kind of get a sense of, oops, I screwed up. And you have a chance to put it right. So this one's in column 2, and then row 3. And then I have my last box 9, and that is in column 3, row 3. And you can do as many columns and rows as you'd like. After a while, it gets a little muddy. The YouTube layout I showed had 7 and 6, so you can go out that far. It gives you greater control, but you don't want to do 15 and 23. It just gets a little too muddy. So let's reload, and I have the text is white. That's why it's missing. But I have all of my 9 in a row. So watch this. Remember we set the columns to auto? So here's what auto does. I stretch it out and then adjust to the size of the web page. But see how the row itself doesn't move? That's always at 100. So if I wanted to add a row, watch, if I go auto and I add, if I add another column, and I go auto and I reload, it leaves me the room to add this. So what I do is, since I have a fourth column, I can bring this box 4 up there by going, so I'm in column 4 now, and I want to go to row 1. And you should see this section 4 box pop up over here. And there it is, but it was removed from here. So you see how you can leave blank space right here, and you can kind of like checkerboard your spaces and stuff like that, because you're just telling it where to go. So like if I wanted to send 6 out this way, so I go and look for 6, and I want it in column 4. It's already in row 2, so 6 is now under 4. If I wanted to move, let's say, 9 and 8 over 1, so here's 8, okay. I want that in column 3. It's already in row 3. And I want 9 in 4. And then there you go. And those moved over. And since it's still set to auto, you can see it moves with it. Now this auto becomes kind of problematic, because if you have text in there, sometimes that text can leave the box depending upon how you shrink the window. And you don't really want that. But this is just sort of like a beginner on how to get it up and running. The one thing I want to show is grid gap. So do you see how it's 10 pixels? That's the gap. That's the 10 pixel gap right there. So if I change it to 20, the gap all around gets bigger. Now there's a way to gap boxes just the column and not gap the rows, but we'll get to that later. Okay, what I'm going to do next is let's start to get our website looking something not like YouTube, but something like this, where you have a box that spans the entirety of the row right here. Each column, you have like a box that takes up 2 rows and stuff like that. So let me show you how to get that up and going. So what I want to do is I want to add another row. I can add as many rows as I want. Doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to add 5, and I'm going to add 5. Just off the top of my head, that kind of seems reasonable. I'm going to go back into my index though, and I'm not going to have 9 boxes. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have 5. So remember how I commented out right here? I'm just going to start at 6, and I'm going to comment that out. And it just removes it from the site. So there you go. It's gone. Okay, so to get it going, to have section 1 span all the way across, okay, basically these 3 boxes, 2, 3, and 4, are going to have to move. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to move section 2, 3, and 4 to, well, let's do this backwards. I'm going to do 5. So all this code in here, you can leave it. You don't have to worry about it. You can put a comment in not using this code, but don't delete it, because sometimes commenting stuff out, remember you can comment out like this. You go / star and then */. It's better to kind of comment out like that than to just delete and then have to recreate everything. So you can comment it out and anything like that, and it's not really harming anything having it in here anyways. So we just have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I'm going to move 5 down to row 3 for the time being, and that frees up moving these boxes here. And remember, we put in 5, so let's see if I can get this working. We are going to move 2, 2, and 2. So section 2, 3, 4 are going to pop down here. And it did, and let's move section 1 over. Here's how you do that. Grid column row / let's try 5. It should move all the way over with 5. It did not, so let's go 6. And the / all that does is it gives you a span. You want to span the entire page, okay? Still has that margin right there, so it's not spanning all the way across. You kind of have to get rid of the margins in the body, which isn't a problem. But now you have these boxes here. So let's take a look at this design. You have 2 boxes here, okay? And I'm not going to, these are at different sizes. I'm not going to worry about that right now. But we're going to have a menu and a footer right there. So let's go ahead and set those up. So section 2, I'm going to put that in column 1, and it's going to occupy column 2 and column 3. So you put 2/3. Okay, there's your menu, and it's going to take up, we can do, since we have 5, let's go ahead and move that over. I'm going to do 1 to 2. I think that'll move it over. It did not, so we do 1 to 3. Okay, so move that over. Now here's section 3 and section 4. Let's keep section 3 where it's at, but let's make section 4 a little bit bigger. So section 4 is in column 4. We're going to go 4/5 and see what that does. Let's go 4/6. Yeah, because column 1 goes to 6. And this, and you can see that I'm kind of screwing up and stuff like that, and that's just kind of how it kind of goes. So you see I have 2 different box sizes. But let's see. I want this section 2 to be a little bit bigger. So I'm going to go grid 2/4 and see it covers up 5. But I'm going to have 5 move out this way. So that's taking up section 2. So I'm going to move this to 3 and have it span out to 6. Remember, 6 is this outer edge right here, and it's in row 3. So let's take a look. And there you go. And it looks pretty close to where we were at. Let's see. Oops, that's the different one. There it is. Looks pretty close, okay? So you can mess around with positioning that way. And I'm not even using, because I did do 6 rows down that way. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's going to create 1, 2, 6 rows all the way down. And I'm not even using that. So if I take one out, leaving it in doesn't hurt anything, really. Taking it out, yeah, nothing really changed. And that's pretty much how you create a grid.